How's it going, guys? Some of my friends on the Discord asked me about how damage is calculated, so in this video I'm going to show you the formula and break it down so that you understand how it works. So here is the formula. I know it looks like a lot, but we're going to talk about it piece by piece. So it's actually really similar for both gunners and blade masters. The only difference is the modifier here. For blade masters, it's going to be a sharpness modifier, and for gunners, it's a critical distance modifier. Alright, let's break it down. To understand this formula, we'll first need to talk about motion values, hit zone values, and quest multipliers. Alright, so motion values. I've heard people say it's everything from how fast a move is to thinking it does a different amount of damage depending on the frame, both of which are wrong. Come on, Capcom, change this confusing term already. All it's talking about is how much damage is dealt for a certain attack. This changes depending on the attack and the weapon type. So for an example, all greatswords will have the same motion values, and so will all of the bows. I'll link to all the motion values in the description, and you can use these to figure out which attacks will do the most damage. Hit zones. Next we have the hit zone values. So each monster will have different weak points, which we call hit zones. The higher the hit zone value, the more damage is done, and it changes depending on the type of damage. If you've used weakness exploit, then you know that it'll give you 50% more affinity when you hit a weak spot. This is what they're talking about. So if a hit zone has a value of 45 or higher, it's considered a weak point and it'll get the bonus. So just a quick note, it doesn't matter what the elemental hit zone is for weakness exploit to kick in. All that matters is the cutting, impact, or shot hit zone. There's also an elemental hit zone for each monster, and we'll talk a little bit more about how the raw hit zone value works together with the elemental one. If you want to see these, they're both available on Chronico. And quest modifiers. As I was saying in my video about how statuses work, the same monster is modified from low rank to high rank to G rank, and we can call these modifications quest modifiers. These don't just modify their status thresholds, but also the amount of damage they do and take. In this video, we'll only be talking about how much damage monsters take. This value can be found on Chronico, and the important thing is to know that the higher rank the monster, the less damage you're actually able to do to it. Part 2, raw damage. In Generations and Generations Ultimate, we get the true damage values, which is nice because in other games, they apply a bloat value to each weapon. We can increase our raw with different buffs, and by using this list of buffs that was compiled onto Reddit, we're actually able to see the different groups so that we can stack as much damage as possible. So after we stack all of our raw buffs, this number is actually going to round down. From there, we'll move on to the sharpness modifier. So here are the sharpness modifiers. You can see that your sharpness does matter, and when your blade is too dull, you're not doing very much damage. There's a debate in the community about whether or not white sharpness is better or if purple sharpness is, and I'm actually going to end the debate right here and now. I took a look at the numbers, and it turns out white sharpness with 20 to 30 more raw over purple sharpness does the same amount of damage when both are at 0 affinity. This sounds good, but when you realize that high raw white sharpness weapons start with negative affinity and don't have very many slots, purple wins due to usability. One exception to this are the Elder Frost weapons. The high raw and positive affinity help them beat out many of their purple counterparts, since they're good right out of the box. If it's just a sliver, then it's probably a good idea to just invest in other skills. For gunners, if you're too close, you'll do 100% damage, or 1 if you're putting it in the formula. At critical distance, you'll do 150, and if you're too far away, you'll be doing either 80% or 50%, or you'll just miss the monster. You know you're in the sweet spot whenever the screen shakes. For gunners, it's pretty clear that you want to stay in critical distance as much as possible. It's also a good thing to know that if you're shooting a pure shot and the first hit is in critical distance but the others aren't, your screen will still shake, but the other hits will be doing a reduced amount of damage. Gunners should also know that there's a reduction in damage if you're using a rapid fire shot. You do get more bang for your buck with rapid fire, but you trade some power. Alright, so crit. So this will actually increase your damage by 25%, or 40% if you're using crit boost. The crit will only apply to the raw portion and not the elemental. Alright, and other modifiers. The other modifiers are going to be things like charging an attack, pierce up, maybe even feline temper, and things like this. Alright, part 3, Elemental. If you don't have an element, then you'll have a 0 for elemental damage and none of this will apply to your weapon. But if you do, this is how it works. Your total damage is going to be a combination of the raw part of your weapon and the elemental. Since we've already talked about the raw, we'll go ahead and focus on the elemental. The elemental damage part is self-explanatory. If you have 40 ice, you'll put 40 in the spot. Since the bowguns don't have elements, they actually get it from the ammo. Go ahead and check out that list of motion values that I showed earlier and look at the ammo types. As I said earlier, the elemental portion of your damage can't crit unless you have elemental crit on your set. For elemental crit, this actually changes based off your weapon. Using this information and seeing which weapons attack the fastest, we can see why dual blades, sword, shield, bow, and light bowgun are the go-tos for elemental damage. Now you have your elemental hit zone. When you're looking to see what element a monster is weak to, I recommend you check out the elemental hit zones. Depending on where you're hitting it, you might want to use a different element or go raw to maximize your DPS. A good rule of thumb is that if the raw is below 30, or if the elemental hit zone is above 30, then you should use elemental. Otherwise, raw is usually going to be your highest damage option. The last piece is the elemental modifier, which is different for each weapon. So for most weapons, they can't actually charge, so this is going to be just a 1. But this will change, for example, with the bow or the greatsword. After you've figured out the elemental portion of your damage, you can just add that to the raw, and you'll get your total damage output. There you have it. That's how damage is calculated in Generations Ultimate. So while I was actually researching this, I found a couple of DPS calculators. So the first one is going to be in English, and if you happen to speak Japanese, this one is a slightly more accurate, but it is in Japanese, so you do have to kind of translate it. If you have any questions or you want something else explained, leave a comment below and I'll get to it. Don't forget to like this video, share with your friends, and join us on Discord. For music and my social media, links are below, and I'll see you next time.